Sarah, Species Merger and Human Evolution. Sarah was a 28-year-old graduate student when she wrote to me requesting a hypnosis session. She was planning to travel soon and wrote that she wanted to be hypnotized before she left, in order to release some emotions and information that feel close to the surface and to lessen some feelings of anxiety and confusion that have been increasing in intensity. Many details of Sarah's file have been omitted in this narrative in order to protect her anonymity. In the letter, she said that a couple of years previously, in the course of massage treatment for pain at the base of her skull, I had the experience of small beings communicating with me telepathically. She also found that she was spontaneously making drawings with a pen in each hand. I never used my left hand before, of what she took to be alien beings, focusing especially on their eyes. Her drawings also included passageways and some sort of subtle body field, like an entity's subtle body. Sarah is one of an increasing group of abductees who bring a degree of spiritual interest to the understanding of their experiences. Her search for meaning and the struggle to stretch the boundaries of her own consciousness enabled her to achieve powerful insights in a short time. In her letter, she also wrote that recently she had begun receiving information linking other entities to issues of planetary preservation and ecological transitions, especially polar and geomagnetic reversals. The desire to serve, to do something constructive for the world, is vitally important for Sarah, although she does not yet know the form that this will take. Sarah grew up outside an industrial city. She calls her Protestant upbringing conventional and describes herself as committed to experiencing reality as clearly as possible. Sarah has never taken drugs and does not drink alcohol. She links this to her encounter experiences, and she believes that since she has stopped consuming caffeine, chocolate, and almost all sugar, her experiences have become much more conscious and clear. Sarah's father has died. Although he was intelligent, Sarah wonders whether he was dyslexic, and she suspects that that interfered with his ability to do the paperwork necessary to be more successful professionally. A frustrated man, he was physically and verbally abusive to Sarah's mother and verbally abusive to Sarah. She witnessed frequent arguments between her parents, and on occasions she saw her father physically abuse her mother. Frightened by her father's temper, Sarah would go into another room to avoid being hit. Sarah recalls that her father was kind to her when she was small, but when she began to excel in school, he became quite distant. In contrast, Sarah's mother is quite successful professionally. Sarah was especially close to her maternal grandfather, who died when she was in her teens. He was very benevolent, and we used to sit just for hours, sit there, and I would read to him. He was my source of support, a really good role model. For about 10 years after he died, Sarah would often have the feeling that her grandfather was in the room with her, especially when she was at her desk working. She recalls a funny room in her grandfather's house. As a child, she would frequently go into this room, shut the door, and sit there for a long time. In a not quite awake state, Sarah would experience a kind of hazy energy in the room, but she recalls nothing else about it. Sarah was an intellectually precocious child, and she was reading on her own at a very early age. She was especially drawn to mysteries and books about ghosts and poltergeists. The family went to church almost every Sunday. I didn't like the idea of original sin. It didn't make any sense to me. I liked the Holy Spirit a lot. She described the Spirit as like the connective tissue that binds all of reality together. By age 11 or 12, Sarah was considering theological questions such as a resolution to the dichotomy of good and evil, and she was drawn to reading about other religions. While Sarah was an undergraduate, she participated in studies of extrasensory perception. Her interest in integrating the discoveries of physical science with explorations of spirituality and human consciousness, have continued. On one occasion, she experienced electrical sensations in her body. On another occasion, I felt like I got out of my body and I couldn't get back in, and I was gone for about 2 days. She was quite frightened by this experience. After graduating from college, Sarah married Thomas. She became increasingly unfulfilled by the conventionality of their life together. He would blow holes in everything I said I felt, Sarah said. She and Thomas remained married for several years due to a strong love between them. In addition, Sarah desired some sort of ordered, comfortable existence. About a year after she was married, Sarah became very ill. Although there is no outward evidence to support this, Sarah connects this illness and later intense pain in her neck and head to the otherworldly presence in her life. "They knocked me down," she said. While out walking with Thomas one afternoon, her legs suddenly gave way and she collapsed. She developed a fever almost immediately. Her condition was quite serious and she was forced to go on disability from work. Her recovery was a long one, and during this period she and Thomas grew further apart and eventually divorced. The couple had no children, and to her knowledge, Sarah has not been pregnant. Regarding her illness, Sarah claims it was for my own good, an intervention that seems to have moved her onto her present spiritual path. About 5 months before she wrote to me, Sarah met a young man named Miguel. When Sarah and Miguel sat down to a meal at their second meeting, he immediately brought up the subject of UFOs and told Sarah that he had seen a spaceship. This kind of synchronicity or serendipity is commonplace among abductees. Sarah refers to Miguel as her extraterrestrial friend. Miguel reported seeing alien beings in his dreams, and Sarah felt that he may even be a representative of an alien species. He sometimes acted so listless that his behavior reminded Sarah of the hybrid children abductees see on the ships. He was in an incubator as an infant and often showed a huge neediness, according to Sarah. At the same time, Sarah valued the opportunity to discuss her encounter experiences with him. Sarah's abduction history is mixed with memories of various sorts of paranormal experiences. She has a very early memory, 6 weeks old or less, of being picked up and moved and looked at. She believes that someone was taking a picture. "It was like the first moment of self-consciousness," she said. "I can shut my eyes and I recall it." Experiences related to ghosts were a permanent fixture of my whole childhood, beginning at least as early as age 4, Sarah recalled. "I became a premier ghost storyteller. Sometimes she would build her stories around embellishments of portraits and tell past life stories based on imaginative recreations of their lives. She would concentrate on the eyes in the portraits and become mesmerized. The portrait would take on a living vibrancy and fill out into a 3-dimensional contour. In addition to the ghost story sessions, Sarah used to play what she called séance games with her childhood friends. Once at a slumber party, she asked her best friend Annie, who was also the smallest, to lie down on the floor and said, "We're going to try to levitate you." I don't know where I knew about levitation either, and we went all in a circle. I think I was at her head, and I started saying something, and then it was like, "Now okay," and the girl went up, you know. Each of the children who were present had a sense that something weird had happened, and afterwards no one spoke of the incident. "I remember that night very vividly," Sarah recalled. "Oh God, that night the whole room was very strange. There was a lot of electricity in that room. I think after that it was not even conscious for the kids. I asked her if they told anyone about it. I don't think they even thought of the idea of telling. It seemed to Sarah as if there were a suggestion they don't tell." A couple of years ago, Sarah says she asked the girl she had floated, "Did we lift you?" And the girl said yes, and that everyone present was frightened by the experience. Later, during the regression, Sarah connected this knowledge and capacity to the floating experiences into, inside, and out of spaceships. "I feel like I'm levitating around the ship," she said, "like someone's giving me a demonstration on levitation. Like showing me, oh, you can levitate. And so they're letting me levitate, they're letting me play, basically. They're basically letting me levitate all the way around the ship and up and down." Although the ghost storytelling stopped when Sarah was about 9, she continued to feel a presence in the house at times. "When I was 13, I used to feel stuff in the house all the time," she recalled, "like things coming up the stairs. I didn't really look too hard, I'd duck under the covers pretty quickly. But I used to say, really loudly, like in my head, I'd never say it out loud. I'd say, 'I'm not ready yet, excuse me, but I'm 13 and just wait.' That happened a lot. A lot. During our first meeting, Sarah discussed the intense pain in her head and neck that she had mentioned in her initial letter to me. Expanding upon her letter, she said that during physical therapy a couple of years previously, she started seeing a lot of figures in my head, and sometimes they would seem to be talking to me. She would shut her eyes and see these little guys up here in this corner of my head, and they were kind of light, really yellow and light, kind of rounded. After I started seeing these guys, the pain disappeared. The figures looked yellow and round and sort of benevolent. The most overarching feeling I get is calmness. They're so calm. They had very light bodies with big heads. She recalls no prominent facial features of the beings, not even the eyes. Nevertheless, she felt and feels a lot of love from and to them. It feels like home, she said, like the ideal feeling of, like a warm family. After initially connecting with these beings, which she calls light beings, Sarah began to put her hand on the spot in the back of her head when the pain became uncomfortably intense, and she'd tune in to the light beings. She calls this listening, and she found it to be helpful in reducing the pain. Sarah also mentioned 2 experiences that occurred about 6 months before I saw her. During one of these, something appeared to be looking at her from the bedroom door as she lay in bed, a presence which was confirmed by the man she was seeing at the time. All I can describe is like an outline. It was skinny, that's all I can remember. During a separate incident, she experienced something in her bedroom next to the bed. This presence was also confirmed by the same man. Although it was emotionally difficult at the time, she sat up and tried to reach out with love and compassion to the entity. After that, the presence seemed to dissipate. About a week before she was to come east to meet with me, Sarah was in an automobile accident, the effects of which repeated the intense pain in her head and neck that had begun 5 years earlier. Because of this car accident, she was forced to delay her trip several days. Miguel was driving the car and became dizzy. He started to space out with distortion of vision, and they both felt as if some magnetic force were pulling the vehicle. The car went off the road over an embankment and folded in on itself. Sarah suffered cervical strain and wrenching of tendons and ligaments, and she was taken to the hospital in an ambulance. When Sarah would shut her eyes after this accident, in addition to seeing the light beings, she could also differentiate a second type of entity. When I shut my eyes, I see them. I see these guys, down in a little row, like 3 or 4 little dark guys, like gibbering. Later she said, "It seems to me like these guys are in my head." In contrast to the light beings, she described the other ones as frenetic. Shortly after the accident, she felt compelled to do her listening every day and to write down the information she obtained. She felt this would render additional accidents unnecessary. A few days after the accident, Sarah and Miguel had an experience in which an unexplained green-yellow light penetrated their room. Miguel is ordinarily fearless, Sarah said, but they were both terrified, and he appeared to have lost consciousness for a time during the incident. Sarah felt as if she were physically pinned down and unable to move. She saw 3 things hovering above me, like 3 shrouded heads, and thought to herself something like, "Listen, we're communicating. This is for real." Something like that, like, "Get your act together and start writing it down." Then the whole thing kind of dissipated. Sarah also reports having observed unusual craft in the sky. On one occasion she was with a girlfriend and they both saw a strange thing hovering above. Sarah looked up, and for a split second I felt like I was there and I was here. I felt like I'm in that spaceship, looking at myself. I felt like I was 2 places at one time, and then I started to think, oh wow, that's another whole possibility. You're coming back to see yourself. On another occasion, she saw what looked like a star. But it wasn't time for stars. It was like an afternoon, really bright, too low but at a distance. After a while, I kind of got fed up with it. I'm like, if you're not going to do anything, then I'm going home. So I got in my car and started to drive away, and then it came at me, and then it came at me really quickly and flew over me. It looked like a flying star. It was just so bright. At the time she thought to herself, God, I've got to tell Miguel, but she did not, and it was like I forgot about it. Sarah's wish to be hypnotized grew out of her desire to know what's true. I don't want to know a story that I make up or anybody else makes up, she said. I really want to know. I really want to know. It's the only thing that's important, even though it may be really complicated and really overlaid and everything. She wanted to get at what these little guys are. Finally, Sarah wants to be responsible for her experiences. To tell you the honest truth, she said, I don't know if I believe myself. There's a part of me that really, really does. But there's a part of me that doesn't, and that part feels like it's destroying me. Sarah's first words after being brought into an altered state of consciousness were, I see my grandparents' house. I'm oscillating between that and my white canopy bed, which was in my parents' house when I was little. I'm remembering a lot about falling dreams that were a series of dreams I had in that bed, where I'd wake up really suddenly and grab the bedposts to keep myself from falling any farther. I felt as if I'd been dropped or had fallen from something very high back into the bed. I had quite a few of those, and I used to wake up feeling as if I might be close to having died. I asked her to describe the sensation further, and she got a real sensation of silver and like some sort of shaft, like an elevator shaft that I'd fallen through. There were further images of white, shiny material and a place I've just fallen from. Then she shifted to being in a field and was looking at what looks like a spaceship from a distance of maybe 100 feet, and I'm outside and alone in the field. The ship was a white domed thing and had a thing on the bottom and an entry that's vertical, and there's light emanating from it. I see a lot of things that look a little bit like skeletons, but a cross between a skeleton and a walking insect. That is, they're walking up and down these inclined planes. There's light coming from... See, one of the doors is folded down, and there's light coming out of it, illuminating the little creature that's walking up and down the inclined plane, looking a little bit like a thick skeleton. He has some sort of a bubble thing on his head, but I get a sense of filaments. Then I just go right back to sliding down something into bed. Vertical. The descents were always vertical. So fast, like almost rudely fast. Sarah recalls that she used to wake up terrified from these abrupt descents from the ship, terrified that I could have died. That was not very careful. It's a good thing I caught the bed or I would have missed it, she said. Her next associations were to a long, shiny white cylinder and the sense of her head hitting a trapdoor. She felt as if she were going back in time to a place where I was dead. Then she saw a being in what looked like a big silver chair or throne made of metal. Although his head was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen, nevertheless, she recognized him. There was an outer orb around the head. It's translucent, and I'm seeing inside to a skeleton face. Inside the skeleton is not exactly like a human skeleton. There's this outer filamenty kind of orb around him, and the smile is kind of sickly, like a skeleton smile. But I don't feel, scared. They're not mean at all, and they're nice. They're nice. No one's trying to scare me. It's not their fault they look like that. Like many abductees, Sarah has had a name for this familiar entity. She calls him Mengus. He's family, really. Kind of benevolent, she said. Next, she recalled herself first at age 10 and then 5, inside the ship. I'm littler than he is, right up in front of Mengus, standing right next to him. She communicated with him, dreamy, like in my head, half telepathically and half verbally in English. He just kind of nods his head. She asked Mengus, "What are you guys doing here on Earth?" And he replied, "Oh, we're just looking around." Sarah then reported seeing what looked like a control panel on the ship, like a cockpit on an airplane, but even more metallic. I kind of float over to this stuff, and she asked Mengus what everything was. He told her this is our transportation system. She pulled at various things, but like nothing's on, so I don't do any damage. He kind of lets me, He's really benevolent. Like here's this little girl, and she's just looking around, and isn't that fine? Although she sensed a real warmth and benevolence, it is mixed with a very steely emotion. Serious, this guy is dead serious. Mengus said something like, "You're young now, but this is like preparation, and this is really important. We're leading you into this pretty easily, but this is not a joke, and this is not just a fly around, and this is serious business, so pay attention." It was just like, don't screw up. The great amount of love she felt from Mengus enabled Sarah to really listen to him and appreciate that there's no margin for error. "I have a weird sense that he's dead now," she said, "and I kind of feel sad." I asked Sarah what made her feel that Mengus was dead. She replied, "I can just read his vibration, and when I go to find it now, it's just like it's died and been recycled. See Paul's explanation of what happens when a being dies. Chapter 10, I can't access him anymore, and he feels dead." Mengus was really nice. I would say maybe like my first real teacher. She has the weirdest feeling that one of the little things I drew, the baby ones, was Mengus's new incarnation. Returning to her experience as a young child, Sarah spoke of the floating, levitating phenomena described earlier and the sense that these capacities, although really fun, had come to her from past life. They were not fun in just the conventional sense, but part of how we evolve. I consciously understood that true fun can be a lot of work and processing. The vibrational energy of the translucent beings, Sarah said, was much more elevated than the conventional vibration you feel here. They're just so much more conscious. They don't keep everything suppressed in their unconscious. They're just awake. They're awake and they're responsible, and they're receptive and they're concise and precise, and their eyes are open. Their hearts are open too. They're not afraid, and they're not stingy and selfish about their love, and it's just really nice. They're so nice. I get the sense there's a translucent thing on the back of their head. Our heads aren't translucent, are covered with hair and everything. We cover up all of our little things that we don't want people to see, and it's like wide open. You can see right into it, and they're telepathic, so they can't keep secrets that way. So as a result, everyone's just a lot more together. They're not in denial the same way. I like that. God, I like that a lot. I wish I could be with them again. Sarah felt that to be with these beings, at least in the happy, innocent way she had just spoken of, she would have to go backward in time. before this life. I think I'll try it, she said. Next, she found herself flying in a white spaceship with a number of little windows. It was flying over a desert area. We're just whizzing around, and I can see down below, and it's so beautiful. I don't know if I've ever been happy like that in this life, just like unreservedly, all the time, happy. Wow. We come over this ridge, and there's this big expanse of desert, and I see these reds and these yellows and oranges, and it's just like sensorially just scrumptious. It's just delicious. In this life, her body was skeleton-like, like Mengus's. It's creepy, and your bones are kind of little and brittle, and it's kind of creaky. You walk in a very disjointed sort of way. Again, Sarah was struck by the joy of the maneuverability she felt with the space vehicle, how just neat to zip around it was. From this alien past life perspective, Sarah spoke of the stupid things that humans do and the temptation to confront them directly. But it's much more useful to be subtle and make sure they thought of it themselves. Human beings are so egocentric, they won't change otherwise. They haven't. They've got this ego thing that they like to hold on to, and they get really threatened. At the same time, there are precious things about human beings. They can smell flowers, for instance, and that's like so incredible, and they get to feel the sun on their skin. As an alien being, I was operating out of less physicality, so you're lighter at one level. There are certain advantages. One is you don't get into these things like depression. But on the other hand, it's a little disjointed and a little bit removed. The olfactory sense is not there the same way. You don't get the depth of smell, for instance, she observed. At the same time, the aliens have seen a bigger picture and have more insight and patience. Also, you have this thing in your head that enables you to access any kind of information telepathically. So you have this kind of informational pliability. I mean, you can get any information you need. Sarah felt that the purpose of her flight over the desert was to survey the planet for planetary resources in order to see what is the survivability of an area like that in case there was to be a huge planetary shake-up. The desert area seemed to be a potentially stable environment in case of a major upheaval because it was high and flat. As she experienced herself flying in an alien incarnation, she felt herself going back and forth between human and alien forms, as if trying to make a decision. The human body identity was aesthetically pleasing for its flesh and things, while at the same time she was drawn to the greater perspective of the alien identity. Sarah returned then to the present and went on to describe a huge, ominous dark cloud covering the sky that seemed to exert a magnetic pull upon her, like throwing dark black tar over my head. The cloud seemed to Sarah to embody the projected negative consciousness and vibrations of human beings. Its impact was debilitating and made her feel victimized. The cloud functioned as a kind of mask or shield to hide some sort of hokey craft of the sort human beings would design if they were to make a spaceship. This craft was the source of negative vibration and was piloted by a human being. It appeared utterly stupid from Sarah's point of view. "I'm just loathing this whole thing," she said. The aircraft's purpose, she said, was ostensibly war, but not war to lull people. The war was with people's heads, war to control people. She felt this huge desire to shield myself from this thing. Next, Sarah described childhood encounters of levitating, floating, and bouncing around her in the room with the white canopy bed. "I feel like someone's almost throwing me up and down." 2 Mengus-like guys have been doing this. She felt as if there were a magnetic field between their fingers and her body. The bouncing about was fun. I was laughing, and then the beings talked to each other, not to me, and left head first through the window. These were friendly visits, like coming over for tea, but the beings became mad after college because she was living such a conventional, stupid life, a very short-sighted existence, especially when she took a job in business. Sarah associated to another experience later in her life. She was alone, lying down on the deck to get a suntan, when I felt something hovering on top of me. She saw a figure that was like a cross between a Mengus being and a person. It was less human in shape, but lighter and free-floating. Sarah received a communication from the being, "This is very important." The intention, she was told, was not aggressive, but some sort of test of genetic compatibility or something, an infiltration, a feasibility test, dimensional merging. I asked Sarah to tell me more of what she meant by dimensional merging. She then described what I believe to be the central image of our first session. "It is like a plane," she said, "a sheet of translucent cellophane. There is, like a huge shattering of glass, and a razor-blade thin slit opens between this earth physical dimension and the realm from which the beings come." In this context, I asked her more details of the encounter. The being had a light contour of a penis, but not like a physical penis that entered her body. The experience was not like anything she had known in human sexual relations. The being itself felt aggressive, and I did not like that part of it. There was not an emotional component to the whole thing on its part. It was more like a scientific explorer territory. I asked if there were orgiastic activity. "It was much, much, much subtler," she replied. "It was not entirely happening in this dimension," Sarah said, "so you can't really evaluate it in the language and physical descriptive terms of this dimension, because it wasn't really happening here. It was half happening here and half happening somewhere else." After this experience, Sarah felt like I'd sort of been hoodwinked. The being didn't give me the full story, and it just kind of said, "Hey, trust me, it's important." Then she said, if a being were to project itself onto a sheet of cellophane, and the cellophane were to shatter through to this reality, and I could stand and watch, I'd do that. I asked if this had in fact happened, come through to her. Yes, she said, about 2 weeks ago, she had gone on a ski trip. There was a large mirror in her hotel room. She arose in the middle of the night, and the place where the mirror had been appeared as a corridor. She attempted to walk down this corridor, but she bumped her head against the glass. Miguel had not gone on the ski trip with Sarah, but the minute I bumped the corridor, Miguel was in the room, and I tried to scream out, "Miguel!" But I couldn't scream. Nothing could come out. She was sharing the room with a skiing friend, who she says independently saw a silhouette in the room. Paradoxically, she just immediately went back to sleep. The bump hurt a great deal, but the pain was compounded by the interpretation of the dimensions as the mirror opened up. It was as if a being that looked like Miguel, or a disguise of Miguel, came through. The being had penetratingly dark eyes, dark, and looked insect-like, with an oval-shaped head and a little shrunken body. That's using the costume to look bigger. It hurt me, Sarah said, but the overall purpose wasn't to hurt me. It was rather to explain something through demonstration, namely, this whole dimensional interpretation exists. By bopping me on the head, they demonstrate, hey, this is physically real. Otherwise, many humans are often too dense and/or too preoccupied to be reached. In a species sense, Sarah has felt compatible with the Mengus type of beings, but the being in the hotel room seemed to be a representative of another species with which Miguel was connected, perhaps in a past life. In Sarah's view, these two species are trying to connect with each other, as demonstrated in her association with Miguel. Each species, she said, had its own vibrational plane, so that for two species to connect, they must create a new vibrational plane of interaction. This could be exemplified in a human relationship that in effect crosses the species barrier. This would be accomplishing an infinite number of things with one beautifully concise stroke. I asked Sarah to say more about the being she saw in the hotel room. The head was the most prominent part of the body and was shimmery, looking reptilian, almost snake-like, serpent-like, and quite elongated. Red vein things made the head appear like a body turned inside out. The creature was not bad, it's nice enough. It was almost like a sea creature, like a mollusk or a snail without the shell. It seemed vulnerable, in need of understanding and cooperation from her. For Sarah to own that the creature truly exists expands my borders of acceptability and tolerance, opening my heart to something that isn't the same as I am. That's good for me. I need to know that. I need to learn that and actively do that. It was sweet, she said, for the being to put on the Miguel costume in order to bridge the gap of unfamiliarity. When Sarah looked into this being's eyes, she saw so much love and felt love herself. She also perceived a kind of sad and battle-weary look, as if it were saying, "Give us a break." They're tired of everyone being scared of them. I feel bad for that guy, she concluded. We ended the regression at this point, and Sarah's mind began to doubt her experience and search for ways to explain the session away. It could be delusions and imagination, she said. But then she observed, it's not imagination either. I mean, it is real. It's more real than imagination. But it's real in a hologram-like sense. Like it's projected, but I don't know. I got bumped on the H. Then you're right back to, my God, it hurt, didn't it? I went through something here, though. That was real, Sarah concluded, all this pain that felt like a searing, burning. After returning to ordinary reality, the two realities seemed more on a par, or much more equal. The larger purpose of bringing these species together, Sarah said later, was to bring about personal evolution in order to achieve universal understanding. The intense pain was used to penetrate the density of human denial, to reach us when we are asleep. Pain is the extreme of physical tangibility. Each species brings something to the merger. The Mengus-like beings, for example, Sarah said, are more spiritually advanced than humans, who need to become a little more Mengusi. The Mengus-like creatures seek a greater physicality, the ability to smell, for example. In the connection of species, each retains some of its original elements. This process of species connecting involves tremendous love. Most ordinary human love, Sarah said, is much more possessive, involving emotions like jealousy. This interspecies love is more unconditional. I think that's everybody's sole reason for being here. Soul, in both senses of the word soul. A few weeks later, Sarah wrote to thank me for my help and said that things seemed to calm down greatly after the session. Approximately 6 weeks after our session, Sarah and I met for about 1 hour to integrate further the openings that had followed her regression and to discuss the possible forms that her life's calling might take. After some discussion of folkloric studies of UFOs, abduction experiences and related matters, Sarah suggested that the aliens may be assuming the forms of technology in order to be more accessible to us, to appear, for example, in something that looks kind of like an airplane to make it a little easier. She, like many of the other abductees with whom I have been working, spoke of the cataclysmic physical changes that may be ahead for the Earth and wondered if somehow ecological and environmental concerns could unite humanity and help us transcend ethnic, cultural, and other boundaries. Sarah mentioned that she would sometimes sob because she missed home, but for her this has nothing to do with my Earth parents. It exists in a different dimension. It was rather a deeper sense of connectedness that she missed. We talked further of what this other home is like and means to her. Home is dimensional, not spatial, she said. But there is communication, nevertheless, between the dimensions. You shut your eyes and there's always communication, she said. The content is almost 100% emotional, she added. It was difficult for her to describe this coherently. It's all about the emotion of love is the most unconditional supportive life. I don't mean that in human life, but creativeness. Growth-affirming kind of love. It bowls you over. When you feel that, and when you feel that connection to that, the love feeling is so tremendous. When Sarah accesses this and other connected states, she says she feels very happy. She says that it feels like the magnetic field around me completely changes. Like space or something is fluctuating, like if you could see a thermal crack or something. It feels like that. She also feels that this state is somehow so familiar that she has always taken it for granted, and that if she focused her attention in this way more often, many additional things would become accessible. Despite the joy she feels when she enters the other dimension, Sarah feels it would not have been ethically correct for her to jump the chasm between the two planes totally or too readily. In the past, she said, it felt as if she made a commitment, like an exchange student spending a year abroad to be here on Earth. She was, in effect, in an immersion program, has taken resources, and has a responsibility to see it through. One way or another, Sarah expresses a desire to use ecology as a way to help people make a transition. People have to redefine philosophically what they mean by environment. People think, oh, my environment, but it's like environment is complete. Environment is infinite. And it has an infinite number of characteristics, and they extend from physical to emotional, psychic, to interplanar and cross-sectional. You are your environment. It's a much broader way than most people think, she noted. Sarah spoke then of how difficult it has been for the human species to reach a creativeness-affirming, life-affirming place of unconditional love, which she related to all the ways by which we differentiate ourselves, such as by creating gender, ethnic, and religious barriers. Ecology could be used to discover commonalities and transform consciousness. If you truly, truly, truly do what's good for yourself, you're doing what's good for the world. The two things are synonymous. Sarah observed that she herself still experiences emotional neediness. Using her metaphor of the exchange student here from another dimension, she said, I might be able to take a vacation back home or be in two places at one time. But she says it may be more useful to reach a state of consciousness in which it didn't really matter to me if I went home or not. Then I can go home because I don't need to go home. She talked further of how her spiritual path was her way of reaching a place in herself where she could give love both there, in the other dimension, and here on Earth. Discussion at one of our meetings, Sarah asked me if I thought that the direction of her thinking and experience reflected something psychopathological, like I'm making it all up. She was reassured to learn that other abductees had been struggling with the same philosophical questions. Sarah has been preoccupied since childhood with philosophical and spiritual questions, and apparently from an early age has exhibited certain paranormal powers, such as the ability at least to create the impression of levitating another child. These concerns and abilities seem to have been intimately connected with reported lifelong encounters with alien beings, beginning in early childhood with a mentor figure she calls Mengus, whom she describes as her first teacher. Sarah's abduction experiences, fun and joyous as a child, but always at another level deeply serious, appear directly related to her personal and spiritual growth and her determination to find a calling that will give sufficient scope for her desire to serve the planet as fully as she can. Ultimately, however, Sarah believes that at its core, the abduction phenomenon emerges from a place beyond the physical plane and cannot be grasped through technology alone. It appears as if from childhood, Sarah's encounters were a kind of preparation of consciousness for a life's work she strives to accomplish. This work appears connected to using an expanded notion of ecology or environment to bring about a paradigm shift from a consciousness of division and separation to one of openness, creativity, and unconditional love. Sarah relates her own evolution in this direction to her encounters and to her role as a kind of exchange student between the non-physical universe from which the aliens or light beings emanate and the earth on which she has committed herself to live. Sarah tried repeatedly in our sessions to put into words the process by which she believes the alien beings can enter our physical universe and she, in turn, can access theirs. One striking image was that of a powerful cellophane membrane that is shattered, creating a slit through which some connection with the other, non-physical dimension may become possible. She says that she herself can access this other universe and that she has longed to surrender herself over entirely to the other domain, which she, like so many abductees, considers to be home and the place of her true parents. But she feels she is constrained from going there altogether by the continuing earthbound challenges of overcoming her own egoistic needs, especially the desire to be loved. Sarah, like other abductees, understands that as she transforms her own consciousness and shares this process, she contributes in a subtle way at a wider level. As she put it, if you truly do what's good for yourself, you're doing what's good for the world. Sarah, like all abductees perhaps, may be participating in some sort of project of species, merger and evolution. The purpose of this project may be to create new life forms that are more spiritually evolved and less aggressive, while retaining the acute sensory possibilities that accompany the dense embodiment of human physical existence. One part of our long hypnosis session involved Sarah's memories of an encounter with an alien being that she experienced as occurring partly in our physical reality and partly in another, non-physical dimension. The most difficult aspect of the various kinds of interdimensional interspecies connection that Sarah described is the different vibrational frequencies by which beings from the other dimensions live and the radical adjustments that must occur for us to connect. Much of the intense bodily distress that Sarah and other abductees experience during their relaxation sessions may relate to the bodily releasing of these vibrational incongruities that have been held in check, sometimes throughout the individual's life, by powerful repressing forces that may derive both from the human psyche and possibly from controls imposed by the aliens themselves. Some of the most intense moments in Sarah's first session occurred when she recalled having been struck or bumped painfully when she misperceived a mirror in her hotel room for an open corridor, a mistake that might have been engineered by the beings themselves. Immediately following this shocking and painful impact, she reported being able to recognize in her room a representative of another, more reptilian-appearing, species of alien beings that she felt was possibly connected with her friend Miguel, as she's been linked with the Mengus-like species. The intense physicality of this sort of experience may be employed so that Sarah and other human beings are forced to acknowledge the reality of entities and domains that our Western acculturation have taught us in recent centuries cannot, even must not, exist. Yet this kind of ontological physical shock may, in my view, be an essential initial step in the process of human consciousness evolution that seems to lie at the core of the alien abduction phenomenon.